Retail is like a puzzle because there is a certain tenant mix that works. If you buy a center with, you said 60% occupied, you said 20,000 feet, 40% vacant at 8,000 square feet vacant. There's only so many tenants that could take 8,000. We know what tenants they are. You look around the centers, is Five Below already in the market? Is Five Guys Burgers and Fries already in the market? They only take probably 3,000 feet, but maybe it's subdividable, right?
Is there another way you're adding value through restructuring leases as well? Like, for example, you mentioned toilets before, where tenants are typically repairing the things within their four walls. But I've seen some retail properties where mom and pop landlords don't have, triple net type of structure or even any sort of structure around repairs, where they're still handling repairs as if it were an apartment. Do you see stuff like that? Are you able to go in and add value through redoing leases and things like that? Just so I can get a better understanding of how you're thinking about the deals you're doing or going to do. Let's say if you found a deal in, let's just call it Kirkwood. Mm-hmm. Hypothetical center, it's 20,000 square feet. It's 60% occupied. Tenants include a pizza place, a barber, a nail salon. What would you be looking for in terms of when you're looking at the property, the type of seller? Maybe you mentioned traffic count, age of the center. Like, what are you looking at before you even submit an offer? And then once you submit that offer, how are you performing DD?
The sellers in this space are typically, and even if you take the current interest rate environment off the table for a second, most of these centers are owned by mom and pop sellers. These are not professional REITs or big owners that we are buying from. These are have owned it in the family for 30, 40 years. This is grandpa's center, and grandpa is either passed away or wants to cash out, and the next generation doesn't want it. And so we're just seeing, just that you hear people talk about silver tsunami. That is happening in retail real estate, that people are looking for wealth, estate planning purposes on how to transfer this wealth to the next generation. And the other piece of that is they are not professional landlords. They have not been driving rents forward. They have not been watching expenses. They have not been reinvesting in the roof and the facade and the signage. It's kind of been, hey, it works now. Let's just keep the rent the way it is. We bought a center in 2021 that had a Chinese restaurant in it. And that Chinese restaurant has not had a rent increase since 1985 when it was built. So that is a very typical seller for us. And so now you add the interest rate environment back in, you're going to have another crop of sellers that are running into, hey, I got to refinance this debt. And now I'm in distress. And so now not only do you have all the sellers that were already going to be there because of generational wealth transfer, but now you have distress in the market. So there's a lot of sellers, but all of them, typically the ones we find, are not professional companies. And so when we approach them, it's typically it's a broker-led transaction. Brokers, I think, are the best source of deals. There's only one of me and my three partners, but we can leverage every other broker in the markets. We talk to them, we tell them what we're looking for. They're the ones out there cold calling, finding the deals. So we get a lot of deals brought to us through brokers, and they all kind of fit one of those two buckets, either the stress bucket or the baby boomer aging out bucket. And to answer your question about how we proceed, it's pretty simple. And I think that's the nice part about retail relative to what you do, is it's four walls and a roof and a parking lot, right? There's not multiple stories. There's not all this internal infrastructure for HVAC units. There's, not elevators. There's not vertical stacks, right? It's four walls and a roof. Everyone inside a retail center is responsible for their own maintenance. If a toilet breaks, they got to fix it. Light fixtures go out, they got to fix it. So from a scaling standpoint and a management standpoint, it's pretty simple It's not easy, but it's simple relative to multi. And so really we're just looking for, is it structurally sound? Is there any environmental issues we need to worry about? Do we need to do some soil borings? Let's get a phase 1. If we need to, let's get a phase 2. And then it's all about ticking down the box of how old's the roof? All right, let's budget for how much that roof's going to cost to replace. Or how's the parking lot look? Do we need to do a mill and overlay, right? Do we camera the sewer? Is the sewer collapsed or not? Is it in good condition? Is it going to last? Just kind of typical physical due diligence stuff. But really, we're underwriting the location more than anything. Is this a growing submarket? Is this have good household incomes? Is there daytime population that can support restaurants? What are the traffic counts? Is it 5,000 cars a day or is it 25,000 cars a day? And that matters. And because the interesting thing, and this, I'm quoting my partner Adam, retail is like a puzzle because there is a certain tenant mix that works. If you buy a center with, you said 60% occupied, you said 20,000 feet, 40% vacant, you got 8,000 square feet vacant. There's only so many tenants that could take 8,000. We know what tenants they are. And my partners are better at this than I. So maybe you should have Adam or Chris or Jared on this to talk about this piece. But, there's a certain amount of tenants that can fit that. And you look around the centers, is Five Below already in the market? Is, Five Guys Burgers and Fries already in the market? They only take probably 3,000 feet, but maybe it's subdividable, right? And so it's not, users like to go in flocks and they all like to be around each other in the same type of center. And you can solve that puzzle by looking at other centers and saying, well, this one doesn't have a hair salon. Let's go find one. This one doesn't have a Chinese restaurant. Let's go find one. This one doesn't have a grocery store. Let's go find it. So it's not rocket science. It's simple, but it's hard. You have to know the right people. You have to know who to call to get the grocery store in there. You have to know the guy at Five Guys Burgers and Fries to get him to look at your deal. So there's a relationship piece to it. There's a problem solving piece to it. But a lot of it's just instinct and gut feeling on, all right, is this a good location? Or does it feel nice? Is it easy to access? Is the signage good? Where someone's driving by, wants a burger, they see the sign and they can pull in. So those are the kind of factors that we're looking for.
When you mentioned that you're mainly buying from mom and pops, this hypothetical deal, if it was ran by some sort of professional owner operator, or if that mom and pop had a third party company managing and leasing it, does that change the way you're looking at it if everything else is the same?
That's a good question. I would say it depends on who the operator is and who the broker is that's leasing it. Brokers are human beings, right? If there's a 8,000 square foot vacancy in this center, but it's all chopped up into one little 1,000 square foot spaces and it's a junior broker working it, or it's at the opposite spectrum, it's the best broker in town, but he likes to get paid on 50,000 square foot leases, not 1,000 square foot leases. So it's what are the incentives around that broker to lease that space? I assume if it's a professional property management company, the expenses are probably pretty in line and there's not a lot of opportunity there. But I think the owner matters more than the operator when it comes to driving leases, because they're the ones who have to sign the lease. They're the ones who have to agree to the tenant allowance package. There's a center that we're chasing right now where my partner Jared is bringing a tenant to the center. And this is a big center. This is 100,000 square feet, 40% vacant, great location. They don't have the money to put into TI. So the tenant needs to come in, build out their own space, put in their own HVAC, because the seller is not watching the expenses. They're not planning for the future. They don't know how to draw a line of credit from a bank to fund these things. And so they're not doing deals. They can't do deals. And so we're coming in with an offer where they get paid and they come out, but we think there's a ton of upside because historically this seller, all the brokers know, don't bring them a deal because they can't do it. Your tenant's gonna have to come out the nose to fund all these improvements. So there's just little opportunities like that all across the country where people, especially these mom and pops, just don't know how to professionally manage these things. They don't know how to watch the expenses. They don't know how to go get a line of credit. They don't know how to negotiate these things such that you don't get stuck with a half vacant building and no money to put tenants back into it.
So there's value in that, without a doubt. And I've seen that myself as well, even though I'm not in retail, just with leasing some of our own properties. Is there another way you're adding value through restructuring leases as well? Like, for example, you mentioned toilets before, where tenants are typically repairing the things within their four walls. But I've seen some retail properties where mom and pop landlords don't have, triple net type of structure, or even any sort of structure around repairs, where they're still handling repairs as if it were an apartment. Do you see stuff like that? Are you able to go in and add value through redoing leases and things like that?
Totally. We just did one at this center that we bought last year where all of the tenants were on gross leases. And gross leases means that they just pay a rent number and the landlord takes care of all the other expenses. And in retail, it's typically triple net, but for these mom and pops, gross is easier. It's easier to calculate. It's just one number. We want to convert all these leases to triple nets. And what that means is the tenants still probably pay one number, but in there is a separate line item for common area maintenance, a separate line item for insurance, a separate line item for real estate taxes. And those numbers are subject to change based on if they go up or down. And so the risk of a heavy snow one year where snow removal spikes, or insurance levels spike, or there's a big real estate tax reassessment and that spikes, that risk is passed on to the tenants. And that is probably the number one thing mom and pop retail operators do not take into account, is that they are on the hook because their tenant's getting one number. If you put them on a triple net lease, you can pass all those expenses back on to the tenants. And I think that is the biggest opportunity we see in the Class B and C when it comes to your question about, is there things in the leases where you can add a lot of value? And I think there's a lot of value to be added there.
Have you seen, or do you think you'll see deals where some of the mom and pops weren't converting to triple net leases, so they're not able to recoup their increased insurance and tax expenses, which, as you know, are two major issues in the real estate world in general right now?
Yeah, that's a big deal. I don't know why they don't think about it, right? It seems obvious to me, but maybe that's kind of goes back to this asset class, is they do not have that experience. They do not have that insight to say, well, this is actually market. If you go to Subway and lease to Subway, they're going to expect a triple net lease. If you hand them a gross lease, they're going to say, okay, great, we'll just take that. So being able to push back and know what market is and know what market rents are is a big leg up that we have in this space relative to the typical owner, seller.